Next on Unsolved Mysteries. At a military base in England, 2 airmen discover strange lights in the forest, and then more bizarre lights and weird events that cannot be explained. In California, a car catches fire on a remote highway. A young woman barely escapes with her life, only to disappear. In Missouri, a teenage girl claims that a cult leader was forcing her to have sex with him, and now he's a fugitive. And police are summoned to a small school on Long Island. A 16-year-old has been murdered, but religious traditions require his friends and teachers to keep silent. Join us. These cases have twists and turns that you will hardly believe. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Rendlesham Forest, England, home to America's Woodbridge Air Force Base. Airman First Class John Burroughs and his partner were on routine patrol along the base perimeter. In moments, it would become anything but routine.
Hey, what the hell's that?
Jeez, I don't know. What the hell is that?
I don't know. I've never seen anything like it before.
It was about 2 a.m. The base was nearly empty.
Come on, let's go back to the guard station. Call the sergeant, see what he wants to do.
All right.
There was definitely something out in the woods. It seemed like to me like a massive light show. I was nervous, he was nervous. We didn't know what to expect, and we decided at that point in time we better get back and let somebody know what's going on in case something did happen.
Burroughs quickly notified his immediate superior.
Yeah, we got some kind of weird activity in the woods off the base.
Hey, John.
Yeah, sure, I can see him from here. It's still going on. Yeah, look, it's some kind of weird lights in the trees. I don't know, they're moving all up and down.
In minutes, another security patrol arrived. They had also seen the strange lights.
You want 3 men to go down off base. You coming with us?
Nope.
All right, look, we'll stay in radio contact.
Burroughs and the 2nd Security Team went off base to investigate.
Going off base, leave your weapons.
They were ordered to leave their weapons behind because they were moving out of American jurisdiction.
We didn't know what we were getting into. We started in on foot towards the lights. At the same time, we could hear the animals were very upset. You could hear a lot of ruckus.
It's coming around us.
At that point, we got a radio transmission. They had just gotten contact from Heathrow Tower in London that an object had been seen over our base, and it had disappeared on radar.
Is that it? I can't tell.
All of a sudden, in the clearing, there was an object. It had a bank of blue lights on it, and it was sitting there like strobing. It was unbelievable. We all hit the ground, and it went up into the trees. When it was happening, everything seemed to go slower. We seemed to be in like I wouldn't say a time warp, but like everything appeared to be happening slower to us, and everything felt different. But when it disappeared, it was like everything was normal again. The perception of the ground, the air, the sky, the stars, the whole 9 yards were different.
Where'd it go?
For more than 2 hours, the 3 men played a game of cat and mouse with a mysterious craft.
It was off the ground and the horizon above the trees. And it always stayed out in the distance and horizon. Sometimes it appeared to get closer, and we were going to get close to it again, and then we never did.
When Sergeant Burroughs and his men filed their report, they assumed that no one would believe their account. And yet, the events of that night resulted in one of the most well-documented sightings of a UFO in history. At our request, the military personnel who actually witnessed the incident appeared on camera for the very first time.
Spit it out. What did you see?
The next morning, Sergeant Burroughs nervously reported the sighting to his shift commander.
We saw some lights, sir. Red ones, some white ones.
And, well, sir, they flew up into the trees.
He basically said, gentlemen, you saw something. Heathrow Tower confirms that you saw something. And now let's go out into the area and see if we can find any physical proof of what happened. I was hoping when I got out there that basically I would see nothing. There would be no telltale evidence that possibly something happened. That would make it easier for me. Because if there's nothing proving that something happened to me, you can just kind of check it off. But when you get out there and you find damage to the trees, depressions in the ground and stuff, that makes it even more unexplainable.
We came up through the woods to this point right about here.
I see.
We saw it hovering.
Later that same day, Burroughs and a British police officer explored the site where Burroughs saw the strange object.
We were watching it for about 20 minutes. See this?
There were circular impressions in the earth directly below the spot where the craft appeared to hover.
And see over here?
Was more of a mystery now. Because when I first saw it, I didn't perceive it as something sitting on the ground with a tripod, like a tripod type thing. Now all of a sudden there's physical proof showing that something sat down in that area.
3.4 meters.
The British police officer dismissed the circles as the marks of animals who had been digging there. But he did order his men to measure the distance between the circles.
3.4 here too.
They were exactly the same distance apart and formed a perfect equilateral triangle. Rumors of the UFO sighting had spread like wildfire. Later that morning, Colonel Charles Halt, deputy base commander, arrived at Woodbridge Security Headquarters.
UFOs, what are you talking about?
The guy saw something.
I was very skeptical. I found what had allegedly taken place hard to believe, and I was really going to debunk it, quite frankly. And as events unfolded, I became more and more concerned that there may be something to this. I kept telling myself that there had to be some type of an explanation for it. But I certainly couldn't find one, and even to this day, I can't explain what happened.
Straight back, straight back.
That evening, unusual lights were once again spotted in the forest. This time, the base commander ordered large floodlights, devices commonly known as light-alls, to be set up in the woods.
All right, move it out.
At 9:30 p.m., Colonel Halt received word that the lights had mysteriously stopped working.
I don't know, sir. Craziest damn things I've ever seen. Animals in the forest are acting weird. Starlight scope's going bad and radios ain't working and light-alls ain't coming up.
Let's get out there and see what we got.
All right, sir.
This is Colonel Halt to command. We're going out.
Base security was immediately ordered to set up more floodlights. Colonel Halt put together a special investigative team.
I called the on-duty or standby man in disaster preparedness and had him get his camera, he was a professional photographer, and calibrate several radiac instruments to take along, and we were going to go debunk this.
By the time Colonel Halt arrived at the site, the second set of lights had also stopped working.
What's going on, Sergeant?
Colonel, we're having a little problems with the
Some of the vehicles weren't working properly, and radio transmissions were limited at best.
Okay, Lieutenant, where'd you see that light?
It was right through there, sir.
Armed with a Geiger counter, a starlight scope to enhance night vision, and a tape recorder to record his first impressions, Colonel Halt led his team into the woods. What he found stopped him in his tracks. Next, one of the most amazing encounters with UFOs ever documented continues.
Radios, they're breaking up.
Colonel Charles Halt and his men were patrolling the forest around Woodbridge Air Force Base in southeastern England in search of a mysterious craft. Some believe it was a UFO.
Let's go. Follow me, sir.
Suddenly, a strange glowing object appeared.
Strangest thing I've ever seen, sir.
As the object began to move away, Colonel Halt and his men followed.
As we were pursuing this glowing object through the woods, we noticed a farmhouse directly in front of us.
We've got a reading of 2 on the counter that's much higher than background radiation.
The farmhouse appeared to be glowing very brightly, as though it were on fire.
I reckon there's somebody in there, sir.
I don't know, Lieutenant.
The object then broke into 5 white objects and disappeared.
Let's go.
And there was a very strange feeling in the air. It made your hair bristle. It was sort of like static electricity. You just had a very unusual feeling. And I don't think it was all psychological. I think there was something physiological about it.
Multiple sightings of up to 3 objects of a similar character, but that...
I think there was some type of guiding force behind these objects. Whether it was trying to communicate with us, whether it was trying to warn us, or whether it was trying to do something to us, I don't know.
To me, it looked like a grid search, like they were boxing off an area and looking for something. And that was the thought that hit me right away, and has stayed with me over the years. It looked like a search pattern.
There's definitely something up there. Hey, we've got an object.
We could very clearly see it. It sort of danced about in the sky, and it sent down beams of light. I noticed other beams of light coming down from the same object, following different places on the base. My boss was standing in his front yard at Woodbridge, and he could see the beams of light falling down. And the people in the weapons storage area and several other places on the base also reported the lights.
I woke up about 3:34 in the morning, and for whatever reason, I felt like maybe something had happened, and I don't know why. I just woke up and felt like something had came back. Don't ask me why, it just was a gut feeling. So I went ahead and got up and went up to the base. All of a sudden, a couple of like blue, transparent type lights appeared in the sky. They were all of a sudden in the horizon, and one of them broke towards us.
Mike, you okay?
The only time the lighthouse were working as far as came on and off when I saw them were when the light passed them. And I have no idea what caused the lighthouse to come on and off other than the fact that the blue light, as it passed it, the lighthouse came on.
At about the same time, just 300 yards away, Colonel Halt's team also had a remarkable close encounter.
The object was coming at us at a very high rate of speed. One of these beams of light fell very, very close to us, sort of a pencil beam of light.
From the object to the ground near our feet. This is unreal.
The visitor never returned.
I drafted a memo, sent a copy to London, and it was swallowed up. It became very quiet.
This is a copy of Halt's memo. It was submitted to British military authorities who never acted on it. The United States Air Force would not acknowledge the episode either. But then a private citizen used the Freedom of Information Act to obtain Halt's memo. Not everybody was convinced. James McGahey is a noted UFO skeptic and director of 2 private observatories.
The burden of proof for any event that is extraordinary is upon those making the claim, not upon those who look at it from a skeptical perspective. Where is the evidence? Show me the evidence. And that's what science is all about. On the first night, at about 3 o'clock that morning, a bright fireball, which is a very bright meteor, came into the Earth's atmosphere. And this is unquestionably what John Burroughs saw that night.
I've seen meteor showers come down before. It wasn't a meteor falling out of the sky, and it went up, not down. Meteors fall from the sky. They don't go back up into the sky.
A meteor's not going to go up, go back and forth, and maintain position in the sky for a long period of time. A meteor's not going to send beams of light down.
I think both of them are being honest as to what their perceptions are, but human perception is very, very easily fooled. And I think when they went out there to the woods, everybody was out there expecting to see a UFO. With that preconceived notion, the way you view things can be greatly influenced.
There's definitely something up there.
McGahey believes that the glowing red light that Colonel Halt saw that night was simply a reflection from the revolving beam of a nearby lighthouse.
It appears to be heading north.
If it were just a reflection, how does one explain 2 different sightings in 2 different places in the sky? How does one explain the object moving through the forest? How does one explain the sighting in the forest by the 3 airmen? There are just too many things. I have a lot of unresolved questions I'm not sure I'll ever have answered. I've had people suggest all sorts of things, everything from I've seen the second coming of Christ to the devil's after us. I can't explain it. I really can't. I know it was beyond the realm of anything that we experience in ordinary life.
Around the same time, 2 other unconfirmed sightings were reported in the vicinity of Woodridge Air Base. At least 15 men, all of them U.S. Air Force personnel, witnessed the strange lights and objects firsthand. The Air Force continues to have no official comment on the entire series of events. Colonel Charles Halt has retired from the Air Force. He spends much of his time discussing his unusual encounter. He hopes that the U.S. government will begin to take UFO sightings more seriously. And maybe one day it will. Next, a young woman disappears. She may be hitchhiking around the country, lost and alone. In a remote corner of the park, a car is found stuck in the mud. The radio has been ripped out. There are small traces of blood on the dashboard and the front seat, along with shredded identification papers. A few torn-up photographs are scattered nearby. It looked like foul play, but was it? The photos, the papers, and the car were all traced to 22-year-old Kristi Krebs. She had worked as a chef just 7 miles from where her car was found. For Kristi's parents, the scene was all too familiar. When Kristi graduated from high school, she went to work full-time in a local restaurant. She was cheerful and upbeat, but she also became infatuated and then obsessed with a married man. Then one day, 3 years before her disappearance, Kristi apparently began to fantasize about marrying this same man. She drove around for hours and lost her way on a country road. Her car became hopelessly stuck in the mud. When the car was found, it looked like this. The interior had been totally destroyed by flames, and Kristi was nowhere to be seen. The fire apparently sent Kristi into a traumatic mental breakdown. The morning after the incident, railroad workers saw a dazed and disoriented young woman wandering along the tracks. One of the men recognized Kristi and called her parents.
Initially, we thought things were okay, but as we were driving back into town, the behavior we were getting from her was very bizarre, chanting and patting her, doing very weird things. And I just looked at my wife and said, "We're not going home, we're going to the hospital."
We wondered if she was ever going to be the same again. At first they thought that she might have been on drugs, but they were able to test her and see that there were no drugs in her system.
Kiddo?
Hi, Kristi.
Over the next few months, Kristi was in and out of the hospital and was eventually diagnosed having had a psychotic trauma-related break.
Why are you doing
My
that?
car. My keys.
Your car's okay.
It's all right, Kristi.
Your car's okay. You need to get some rest.
After therapy and drug treatment, Kristi made rapid progress. And after 6 months, things were looking up. Kristi was released from the hospital, and her therapist recommended that she go back to work, but only part-time.
I think it was suggested she worked 20 hours a week to start with. And she did incredibly well, and she was very proud of herself, and she got herself a second job at a local fast food restaurant.
20?
Eventually, Kristi began working 10 to 12 hours a day. 3 years went by. Kristi's parents worried about her manic pace, yet Kristi insisted that she was okay, right up until the night she disappeared. That night, Kristi left work in high spirits, but she didn't go straight home. Kristi drove around until, at some point, she veered onto a dirt road. She ended up here, just 7 miles from the spot where the car fire had occurred, once again stuck in the mud.
I think that she probably had flashbacks. It was like reliving that nightmare, and all of that, I think, just overloaded all the circuits.
Kristi's father believes that his daughter suffered another psychotic break.
In my mind, the last thing she did, she went through her wallet in total frustration, whether she's looking at pictures of family and friends. She ripped them all up. She whipped them up and scattered them around. Whether she was destroying her past and trying to get away from it, I really don't know. I know that my daughter went through a really tough time out there for 2 or 3 hours.
The authorities think that before she abandoned her car, Kristi changed into a gym outfit that she always carried with her. Her work clothes were found sopping wet and neatly folded on the back seat. The next morning, a full-scale search was launched, but there was no trace of Kristi. However, over the next few months, several sightings were reported in Texas, then in Salt Lake City, and finally, a year later, in California. Just outside the farming town of Visalia, California, an off-duty highway worker named Mike Case picked up a hitchhiker who looked like Kristi. It was 300 miles south of the spot where Kristi's car was abandoned.
It seemed to me that she didn't have it all there. At first, I thought possibly she was on some type of drugs. But talking with her a little bit at the beginning, I knew that possibly she was in a world of her own. What happened to your wrist there? I did happen to notice that on her wrist, there was 2 slash marks on her wrist. And I asked her directly, I said, well, what happened there? And she said, I had a breakdown.
I had a boyfriend. He wasn't very nice.
Mike dropped Kristi off at an intersection near Hanford, California. A week later, he read an article about Kristi's disappearance and contacted her parents. They immediately sent photographs.
I went through several of the pictures, and my personal feeling, that was the girl I picked up on the freeway. I'm positive that is her. I'm positive. And I can say that now. I can say it's positive.
I believe that Kristi is out there somewhere and that she's alive because Kristi is a survivor. She has a lot of strength. She's very friendly. I believe that she would not be a loner, that she would hook up with someone.
We want her back home because we know that with our help, she can once again recover from whatever it is that she's going through. And we really hope somebody out there knows where she is and can help her get home.
Kristi's parents now believe one of the most credible sightings is from a woman who picked up a girl hitchhiking between Salt Lake City and Park City, Utah. The woman was able to describe details about her clothing that had never been released to the public. Kristi Krebs is 5 feet 2 inches tall and has a deformed right thumb that is thick at the knuckle with the tip of the thumb curving inward. Next, a young woman is held against her will by a cult. She accuses its leader of kidnapping and rape. The small Midwestern town of Liberty, Missouri. Just before midnight, at the compound of a local religious group.
Tim? This is Julie.
What are you doing? It's late.
Can you please come get me?
The young woman is Julie Cooper, and she's 22 years old. She made this desperate call for help to a man that she had met only once. She would tell him that she had been trapped in a religious cult called the Decloud family. For 16 years, the family, nearly 30 men, women, and children, lived together in a commune far removed from the outside world.
Julie had told me bits and pieces of what had gone on, but I'm still not aware of the whole story. And I'm thinking, well, you know, it's no big deal. Nobody's going to catch us.
Julie convinced Tim to help her escape from the cult.
She was crouched down in the grass with a trash bag full of clothes.
Go, go, go!
She was very, very nervous and very afraid.
After 10 years, Julie Cooper had finally escaped from the cult. She then contacted authorities and told a horrifying story of her life within the commune. The most chilling allegations focused on the leader of the cult, Nelson Decloud. Nelson Decloud was an ex-police officer from Raytown, Missouri, a suburb of Kansas City. He considered himself the spiritual leader of his family. That's what he called his followers.
Nelson thought that he was God's son. Not really that he was Jesus Christ, but that he was one of God's sons and that he couldn't do any wrong.
He said to me, "These are they which came."
Nelson had a very booming voice. His eyes were like a white blue where that just would scare you.
Praise the Lord.
When her family joined the cult, Julie Cooper was just 6 years old. When she was 10, she says Decloud forced her to watch him have sex with a female member of the family.
I want you to stay out here for a little while.
He asked me to have sex with him, and I didn't want to, and I didn't.
What I want you to do, Julie, is what God wants you to do. You understand me?
Yes.
All right.
I guess he was so far into he couldn't do any wrong kind of deal that it didn't matter to him.
Now you listen to me. Do you know how old Mary was when she had Jesus? 14 years old. 14 years old. Now you think about that. There's nothing wrong with that.
He put me out in this like wooded area. I didn't have any food. I didn't have any jacket or anything like that.
When are you coming back?
I'll know when to come back. God will tell me when to come back.
Julie stood in the field alone and shivering for 8 hours. Only then did Nelson take her back to the compound.
There is a sinner amongst us, and I am deeply troubled.
Another member of the family was publicly humiliated after she confronted Decloud about his cruelty.
She has chosen to disobey my word. She has chosen to disobey God's word.
He was gonna make an example of her in front of me and in front of others.
Penance!
And that was enough to scare me. He knew that I was already scared. I felt like it was my fault because here she tried to stand up for me and I wasn't giving in. He found me and he says, "Well, are you ready now?" And of course, you know, after all that had happened, I just said yes.
Julie became a prisoner in the compound, forced to serve as one of Decloud's unwilling sex partners. When she was 15, she made her first attempt to escape.
After everything had happened to me, everything was going on, I decided to run away. You know, I just couldn't take any more.
Nelson Decloud immediately organized search parties to find Julie.
Julie, you stop right where you are. You hear me, girl? You stay right there. Stop right there. Come here. Come here.
No, let me go, please!
Come on and get
Let me go!
Nelson and another guy came, picked me up, handcuffed me, and took me back. I was so scared of him, of what would happen to me.
Offer your shoes!
Julie was ordered to take off her clothes, and later, she was severely beaten.
Offer your shirt.
After that, he always kept me with him. I always had to sleep with him in his bus, in his area. He wouldn't let me out of anybody's sight.
7 more years passed, Julie patiently waiting for one more chance to escape. And then, Nelson Decloud asked Julie to contact a satellite dish repairman. And that's when Julie Cooper met Tim Santee.
As I pull into the driveway, I see several cars. I see a lot of kids running around, and the first impression that I get is that, you know, this has to be some type of party.
From the satellite company?
Ah, Brother Nelson. This is our brother in God, Nelson Decloud.
Nelson, I'd like for you to meet Tim.
When Tim was introduced to Nelson, he didn't show him any respect. He didn't think of him as anybody or anything. And that made me feel good. It made me feel like I could trust in someone. I could actually talk to this person and he could understand me.
Over the next couple of weeks afterward, I had asked her out for a date, and she had seemed like she was willing but was not, that there was something that was holding her back.
Well, he had asked me out, and of course I told him that I couldn't go, and I couldn't go for a year, you know, wouldn't be able to get out for a year. And that was just a way of putting him off and seeing if he was willing to go on with trying to wear me down.
In the course of our conversations on the phone, she had come up with a plan that she would need to sneak out at night undetected.
I called Tim up and I said, I want to go tonight. We made a time at 1:15 in the morning, and sure enough, 1:15 hit, he was there.
Go, go, go!
After I left, I was afraid they would take me back. They would beat me, do something to my mom. I'm still afraid that he is torturing my mom in some way for what I've done.
At dawn, Decloud and another family member went looking for Julie. Pretending to be police officers, they drove to Tim's house.
Hey! Hey! Where's Julie?
What?
Where is Julie?
Lucky for Julie, Decloud had the wrong address. The house belonged to Tim's brother, Ted. Tim and Julie were just a few yards away, sound asleep, in the house next door.
The next day, Ted came up to me and said, "What the hell's going on here?" Two strange people had come into his home looking for me, like I was a criminal or something.
They won't let me leave.
And that's when Julie had told us the whole thing of what was going on.
Why did you want to run away?
She had also alluded to the fear that any man that was physically able from that group would probably come in and try to get her.
And they raped me, and I can't stay there anymore.
Detective Dwayne Wiersma of the local sheriff's department had been suspicious of Decloud and his cult for a long time.
I was abused.
I believed Julie from the beginning.
What type of
We
abuse?
had a hard time trying just to focus on the charges of a rape at the time because there were so many other things that he could have been charged with.
Decloud quickly ordered the women and children to load their possessions onto 4 converted buses. Decloud then took them away from the commune.
We believe they're still together because Nelson feeds off the power of being in control of a group. If he doesn't have the group, then he has no power.
I want Nelson to get caught because it's not fair to anyone else that's up there. My mom and dad, they need to know that he isn't the Messiah. He is a criminal. What he was doing was wrong.
The sheriff's department issued a warrant for Nelson Decloud, but he was long gone. Update. After our broadcast, several viewers from San Angelo, Texas, called Unsolved Mysteries. San Angelo is a small town 500 miles from Decloud's old headquarters. Our viewers called to say that they had seen Decloud's wife in the area. The cult had apparently settled into this farmhouse. When state and local agents arrived, Decloud kicked out the screen of the upstairs window to make his escape.
The deputies approached him, and he tried to wrestle with a few of them briefly. There were so many law enforcement officers, though, that that didn't last very long. They put the handcuffs on him and escorted him out of the building.
Nelson Decloud was brought back to Liberty, Missouri to stand trial. He was convicted of rape, sodomy, and kidnapping. He is currently serving a prison sentence of 220 years. Next, at least 3 different women go on a date with this man and are never seen again. On an earlier program, we told you about missing fugitive Robert Weeks. 2 of his long-term girlfriends had planned to break up with him, and they both disappeared after one last dinner date. Their bodies were never found. Weeks' ex-wife, Patricia, had also vanished years before.
Whoever he's involved with now may end up in the same situation. I definitely think there's a pattern, and I definitely think it could happen again.
Update. The day after our broadcast, Robert Weeks was captured in Arizona. He was living there with a new girlfriend, and when she saw our story about him, well, she turned him in. At the time, Weeks was running a company called Snuff It, which made ashtrays. His business partner was interviewed shortly after Weeks' arrest.
He said, I haven't told anybody this yet, but I watched that program. And I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, I watched it, but I didn't figure any of my friends would be watching it.
Weeks was brought back to Nevada on a long-standing embezzlement charge. Shortly after, he was indicted on 2 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert Weeks was still behind bars when he died in 1996.
Sadly, the bodies of Robert Weeks' victims were never found. Weeks knew a lot about mining, and authorities believe that he may have hidden the bodies in one of the many forgotten mines in either the Arizona or Nevada desert.
Orthodox Jews trace their roots back 5,000 years to the time of Moses, and they live according to strict codes that have remained unchanged for centuries. To maintain their traditions, many communities have established yeshivas, which are schools that emphasize the principles of Orthodox Judaism. One Saturday morning, Don Daly, a veteran Nassau County, New York police detective, was dispatched to a yeshiva in Long Beach, New York, to investigate the murder of one of its students. The victim was 16-year-old Hyam Weiss. A single blow to his skull with a sharp object had severed his spinal column. Investigators found no murder weapon, there was no evidence of a robbery, and there were no signs of a struggle. Detective Daly realized that this would be unlike any other homicide investigation in his 25-year career.
Well, I think initially we were dealing with a Saturday, which is a Sabbath. When we arrived at the scene sometime around 8 o'clock in the morning, it was difficult to talk to anybody at that particular time because, number one, the people we're dealing with, being Orthodox Jews, they're not able to write. We couldn't take statements from anybody. We got the impression a lot of the students at that time were afraid to talk to us or were a little shy.
As he investigated the scene, Daly thought the killer might have been familiar with the yeshiva and the customs of Orthodox Judaism. It appeared that Hyam had been killed while he was sleeping. His body was then moved, first from the bed to the floor and later to another spot 2 feet away. Curiously, Hyam's window was left wide open on this chilly October night.
It would be customary in the religion to open a window or a door where the dead person would be to let the spirit out. It would also be customary for the body to be taken off the bed because the body should be at the lowest point and the coolest point being the floor compared to the bed.
Another ritual would result in a third puzzling clue. One of the rabbis asked to leave a memorial candle in the room to burn for 7 days. The crime scene was then sealed. However, 2 days later, another candle mysteriously appeared. No one in the school ever admitted to having placed it in the room.
If they lit that candle as a gesture of sympathy or love for Hyam, why wouldn't they come forward and say that? That's certainly a good thing to do. Nobody came forward with that.
Detective Daly set about piecing together the final hours of Hyam Weiss's life. He learned that Hyam was an outgoing, likable teenager who was at the top of his class. He had been attending the yeshiva in Long Beach for 2.5 years. On the day he was killed, Hyam left class with his friends to attend services. Afterwards, he returned to the dormitory. Hours later, 2 classmates saw Hyam reading in the hallway.
Many of the students do that because of their religion. They don't put lights on and off. On the Sabbath, it was dark, so the lights are left on in the main hallway. The students sit out in the hallway and read.
Police think the killer probably knew the layout of the dormitory and was probably aware that Hyam was one of only 2 students without a roommate.
We did have one student who felt that he heard his door open up sometime during the night and then close again, but he assumed it was his roommate. There are a lot of questions that we haven't been able to answer. We really never got any leads in this case. Nothing from the outside, which is unusual. We have some things that we have to put behind us here.
A few days after the murder, Detective Daly called a meeting with the students, teachers, and rabbis.
But if anybody knows anything, we need the help.
But almost every question he asked was answered by silence.
You fellas really, do you understand how important this is? We learned at one point that in their particular Orthodox religion, unless you have proof or another witness, mere suspicion alone is not enough to go and say anything or to accuse somebody.
Do you know for sure who killed Hyam Weiss?
No.
Police eventually polygraphed 40 students and several of the school's teachers and rabbis. No suspects or motives were revealed. Who killed Hyam and why remains a mystery.
The not knowing makes it much more difficult for me to cope. Certain things I accept. My son's dead, but the murder is still loose. All these unanswered questions makes me feel very, very uneasy.
Why would anyone brutally murder a 16-year-old boy who had no known enemies? Police have uncovered only one significant clue. A jogger stated that he saw a young man a few blocks from the school on the morning Hyam's body was found. All attempts to identify the student have been unsuccessful.